Nightmare stories about neighbor conflicts.
True stories from Reddit. Our neighbor was constantly complaining that the plants on our side of the shared fence were pulling it down and ruining the plants on her side. Just by looking at the fence, you could see it was heavily leaning toward her side. This wire fence sagged so badly, it was practically touching the ground. On our side, we had a few plants near the fence, but nothing like what she had. And yet, she insisted it was all our fault. When we were moving out, we hired a couple of gardeners to tidy up the yard a bit for the next tenants. We left them to work and went inside to pack our stuff. Later, when we checked on their progress, the neighbor had shown up and told them to get rid of all our plants along the fence that didn't belong to her. Instead of talking to us first, she had these random gardeners yank every flower bed along the fence out by the roots, just because some stranger said so. And of course, the fence wasn't affected at all. Not even a little.
So here's some context. My husband and I live in a nice, spacious suburban neighborhood. We're about 25 years younger than most of our neighbors, and everyone here sits on at least an acre of land. We're not sloppy people. Our yard isn't perfect, but it's well kept. We mow the lawn once a week, and we even built a big shed next to our detached garage ourselves. Took us 3 weekends, and we were proud of it. Then one day, we get this letter, typed on a freaking typewriter from something called the Upper Smith Neighbors Group. Here's what it said, and yes, I'm quoting. When you first moved in, I wasn't sure if you had the proper level of culture, financial means, and social status to belong in our prestigious neighborhood. I see you finally built a place to hide all the junk you insist on storing in your yard. Now maybe you could do something about those weeds you call a lawn. Excuse me? That junk was literally building materials for the shed, which were delivered, used, and cleaned up within 3 weeks. I was fuming. And of course, my first thought was revenge. But I didn't want to do anything rash. I wanted something classy, something petty, but perfect. Weeks went by and then it hit me. Right before the 4th of July, I grabbed 2 old toilets, dragged them to the end of my driveway, and set them up like fine art installations. Then, I planted red, white, and blue flowers in the bowls and added a couple of tiny American flags for that extra patriotic touch. And just to make it crystal clear, I put up a big sign. Thanks to the Upper Smith Neighbors Group for your letter suggesting I take better care of my yard. And you know what? I left them there for an entire year. Every holiday, I changed the decorations in those toilet bowls. Halloween, skeletons and cobwebs. Christmas, tinsel and ornaments. Easter, yep, pastel eggs right in the porcelain. The tackier, the better. Petty? Oh, absolutely. Satisfying? You have no idea.
Next to us lived an old man named Louis. He was a cranky little guy who argued with every neighbor. His lot was the last one on the street, at the corner, touching 6 other properties, and he was at war with the owners of every single one. When I first moved in, I tried to be friendly, and people warned me about him. I planted a garden, and he sprayed my plants with weed killer, including my beautiful watermelons. He yelled at me, he yelled at my dog. My wife said he made crude comments to her. One day he called me a fat hillbilly with not a dime to his name. I called him a silly old Italian, and he acted like I'd wounded his delicate feelings. This went on for years. He was constantly annoying everyone around. Then something unexpected happened. One day I was at a flea market and saw him in a tiny motorized wheelchair. I tried to keep my distance, but then I heard him behind me. "Hey, aren't you the guy who lives next to me?" I said, "Yeah." He held out his hand, shook mine, and asked how I was doing. We talked. He was friendly. He told me his wife had recently had a stroke and invited me to his house. I was baffled. That summer, he spotted me again and came over to chat. I mentioned I played guitar, and he immediately offered to bring his guitar so I could play for his wife in the kitchen. I was shy about it, but I brought my guitar anyway, and they loved it. Eventually, he apologized for his past behavior. I apologized too. Louis and I became friends for several years. He told me stories about his childhood in the 1920s. He turned out to be a good person. No other neighbors forgave him, but I did. I figured his doctor probably put him on antidepressants. Anyway, he passed away in 2001. He had diabetes and took nitroglycerin for his heart. Neighbors said he took his ticket to the ancestors willingly, but I knew someone else who didn't take nitroglycerin in time and died, so I think he had an attack and couldn't call for help. About a year before he died, he asked me if something happened to him to check the door on his garden shed and make sure it was locked. I checked. It was locked.
At the time, we lived in a new neighborhood, one of the most prestigious in the city. Our next-door neighbor was an elderly woman who mostly kept to herself. I was really surprised when one day she knocked on our door and asked me to come outside with her. She led me to her backyard and walked over to the property line with the neighboring house. A few months earlier, a family with 2 small kids had moved in there. I knew they had children because they were always outside, even in winter. She asked me if I could smell anything. I did, but I couldn't pinpoint it. "They're cooking meth in that house, like Heisenberg," she said. "I wanted you to confirm the smell just to make sure I'm not imagining things." She owned rental properties and had encountered that smell before when tenants ruined one of her houses by cooking crystal meth inside. "I'm worried about those kids. Go home. I'll call the police." The cops arrived super fast. The parents were arrested on the spot. The father screamed a ton of curses at the elderly woman's house, while 2 officers dragged him across the yard and put him in one of their cars. The mother kept yelling, "My kids!" as they put her in another car. I didn't see the kids, but I could hear them crying and screaming. Social services arrived and took them away. They were the first tenants in that new house. The place had to be completely cleaned, some parts even rebuilt because of all the chemicals. The cleanup took nearly a year. The neighbor probably heard every word that man screamed, and she definitely risked his retaliation if he got out on bail. He wasn't released, but she undoubtedly saved those 2 children.
We had a neighbor around our age who seemed like a normal guy with a steady job. He lived in a house with his girlfriend and smoked a lot. Nothing remarkable. Then his girlfriend eventually dumped him, and we watched him slowly lose it. After a series of episodes, screaming into the phone, freaking out whenever his ex came by, we witnessed him completely losing his mind. One night, he grabbed a hammer and started smashing his kitchen cabinets. Our bedroom window had a direct view of his balcony and kitchen window. I was falling asleep when I started hearing a repeating thump-thump sound. I looked out and saw him in his brightly lit kitchen, furiously destroying everything. The landlord had recently renovated, so all that furniture was brand new. He smashed the whole kitchen, yelling and laughing, while we watched in disbelief. He couldn't see us, but I remember just freezing, staring at this guy, completely losing touch with reality. I called my boyfriend over to watch too. Eventually, he calmed down and disappeared from view. I don't think I slept much that night. A few weeks later, we ran into the property manager. She told us he had moved out and then casually added that she thinks the house is cursed because the last 3 couples who lived there all broke up.
I don't remember this one too clearly since my parents handled it. Ever since we moved into the apartment we live in now, we were getting insanely high water bills. After years of trying to cut down on shower time and other little things, my parents finally called the water company. It turned out that the pipes to the laundry on the ground floor, which belonged to our neighbor, were set up so that all the water they used was being charged to us. And this wasn't just some tiny operation. It was an actual laundry business. Eventually, the problem was fixed and we started paying normal bills again. I don't remember if we ever got compensation for all the years before. My dad, who was handling the case, passed away around the same time. Not because of this issue. He was battling cancer. We had neighbors who were clearly unhinged, elderly, both unemployed, and clearly going through rough times. So what does an unstable, meddling person do? Of course, peek over a 6-foot wooden fence to spy on neighbors. They called animal control on us because, according to them, The water in our pool was dirty for the dogs. Not the drinking water, which ran automatically and refreshed every time the dogs drank, but the little pool where our dogs like to splash around. We asked them, "Why the hell did you call animal control on us? Our dogs have an entire floor in the house. They're clearly not suffering." Through hysterical sobs, they replied, "We just didn't know what else to do." After that, we moved to a different place and they stole our huge ceramic pots with bamboo that had been on either side of our porch. When we confronted them about the theft, they got mad and said, "Since you're moving out, it's now all community property." A new neighbor of my friends asked them to stop cooking food because the smell bothered her in her guest bathroom whenever she was near the vent. She suggested that instead of burning cooked food, my friends should just eat sausages and nuts or somehow heat their food naturally. She never clarified what exactly that meant. Later, she sent them a message saying that if they needed to cook, they should simply not cook. Eventually, she took her complaint to the landlord's office, claiming that my friends were cooking food. Luckily, the complaint was dismissed because it was completely ridiculous. If you're one of these people, please never live in an apartment building. Our first house was in a working-class post-WW2 suburb. The houses were spaced about a driveway plus 2-3 feet apart. Open yards. We moved in early spring when our child was 2, so we spent a lot of time outside. When our new neighbors, both in their 70s, came home, we smiled and waved. They came over to introduce themselves, and the first thing the woman said was, "I just want to say, don't shovel snow onto our house. If water gets into our basement, we'll sue you." Okay, nice to meet you. And that was the start of the most ridiculous neighbor story I've ever experienced. I worked as a nanny for another little boy, and this neighbor kept knocking on our door, demanding, "Shut those damn kids up, or I'll call social services." The kids were just running around my house, which I bought, or playing in the yard, happy and noisy like normal kids. Eventually, I got fed up and called the police to report her harassment. That's when things got really weird. She would get up around 7 a.m. and start banging on all her windows facing our house. Open them, slam them, repeat, punching them with her fists. Then half an hour to an hour later, she'd go out to her car, slam the doors loudly, shake her keys as hard as possible, drop them on the ground, pick them up, shake again, drop again, and leave until noon. Sometimes she'd show up unexpectedly, trying to give me $1 for my son's birthday or begging to come inside with tears in her eyes. I think she was starting to show signs of dementia. About a year after we moved in, they sold their house.
I was really little, like 5 years old. I remember my parents always talking with our neighbors about people who lived a few houses down. At the time, I didn't really understand, but they mentioned something about illegal activities, danger, and so on. Most of it just went over my head. One day, a bunch of neighbors on our street got together to talk about these dangerous residents. Nothing really came of it, as far as I know. The police weren't called. I remember thinking those neighbors were kind of weird and definitely scary. My parents didn't let me or my siblings play in the front yard unsupervised. Occasionally, they threw parties that got out of control and made a ton of noise. I remember not being able to sleep because the music was so loud. Then one day, I came home from school and saw fire trucks and police cars. The house was on fire. Since I was only 5, my parents didn't give me the full details. They just said there was a fire and the people living there had to move out. It wasn't until years later that I learned what really happened. The people living there were dealing illegal drugs. And that fire? The meth lab exploded and almost burned the house down completely. The dealers were arrested, and no one ever saw them again. Thanks for watching.
Subscribe to True Stories from Reddit and smash that notification bell so you never miss these mind-blowing stories. See you in the next one.